Hi everyone. This is a short presentation on 3 terms that are frequently used in instructional design and assessment efforts: goals, objectives, and outcomes. It's important to differentiate between these terms because they are sometimes used interchangeably, which can cause confusion. However, these terms, both on their own and in alignment with one another, can be incredibly useful when used well. The definitions used in this particular presentation are based on a review of resources from several teaching and learning centers across the country, which will be cited throughout the presentation. By the end of this presentation, you will be able to differentiate between the terms goals, objectives, and outcomes, and discuss goals, objectives, and outcomes in alignment with one another. Let's begin by featuring this helpful image from DePaul University's Teaching Commons site, which distinguishes these 3 terms through a lens of specificity. As you can see in DePaul's pyramid scheme, outcomes are more specific than objectives, which are more specific than goals. Let's focus on the broadest term first: goals. Goals are broad statements on learning over time. The broad terminology in goals is purposeful because goals focus on learning across the curriculum and co-curriculum, and they are created so that instructors can easily align their course objectives and outcomes to institution-wide learning. Learners should be able to master the skills described in goals by the completion of their degrees, and use these skills beyond their degrees. So goals are very broad and focused on integrated learning across the curriculum and co-curriculum over time. Intercultural knowledge is an example of a broad goal. Let's now turn to objectives, which are more specific than goals, but not quite as specific as outcomes. Objectives signify intended learning in a course. So, if intercultural knowledge is one of our goals, we will want to create an aligned objective that describes a learner's future performance in the course. And we will need to use a measurable verb to observe and assess the learning that will be taking place. As demonstrated in this image from Vanderbilt Center for Teaching, Bloom's taxonomy is a solid source for measurable verbs. According to a helpful tutorial from Oakland University's Center for Excellence in Teaching and Learning, since objectives focus on future learning, it's helpful to think of objectives as tied to our instructional materials, which support the learning that students will be doing in our courses. So, for example, if one of my objectives states that learners will analyze U.S. social movements through a sociocultural lens, I might then assign readings and videos that are sociological and cultural in scope. Notice that my objective is aligned with my goal, and that it uses the measurable verb analyze. For more information on objectives, see our companion video on writing measurable objectives. Finally, there are outcomes. Outcomes are the most specific of the 3 terms. And while objectives are tied to the instructional materials that support student learning, outcomes are tied to student work products, or the results of the learning. Outcomes describe what learners should know and be able to do by the end of their courses. And like objectives, outcomes use measurable verbs. Outcomes are intentionally specific, since they are tied to student work. You can see in this example the specificity of this particular outcome. Aligning these 3 learning aims and distinguishing between these 3 terms not only makes your instructional design more transparent for learners, it also aligns your objectives and outcomes to institution-wide goals and learning across the curriculum.